I feel as though going from basketball to track and field was one of the best decisions I ever made in my life. Not because I enjoyed the sport more or not because of who I enjoyed doing the sport with. It's about what the sport did to my mentality. I know someone out there is going to close the video right now and then just comment, oh, track and field isn't that hard. All you do is run. All you do is throw. All you do is jump. You might be right, but you couldn't be farther from the truth. During my time playing basketball, I was a significantly slower, bigger, and just less coordinated athlete. No matter how much I would try and say I was, the best or I was a good basketball player, one of the hardest decisions was looking myself in the mirror and knowing I'm not going to the NBA. So I'm probably not even making it to college playing basketball. It was the abandonment of that sport that I clung on to from my childhood that allowed me to reach new heights. It allowed me to reach new places that I could never even think of athletically. When I would play basketball, there would be a lot of, oh my God, I had a terrible game. But then the team wins and some dude scores 30, so everyone is in good spirits, good heights. But it's those guys that score nothing, those guys that don't get in the game. Those are the guys that have the most thoughts post game. And I was one of those guys. No matter how good I would be in practice, no matter how well I studied the plays, no matter how well I studied the other team plays, it doesn't matter if you don't get in. If coach doesn't put you in, even if you are a diamond, you always look like a rock on the bench. And so I made a big decision, junior year to quit basketball. But there was a lot of factors that led into that. There was a lot of factors that made me confident in my decision that track and field was somewhere where I was going to flourish. One of the biggest factors for me is even though I wasn't good at basketball, I wasn't good at track and field either. When I started throwing, I was probably one of the worst throwers in the state. And I remember at my first meet where I broke 100, no one recorded it. I didn't take a picture of the results. So the next meet when I got seated at that meet, I took a picture of the heat sheet and I was an eighth for the first time ever. I was top 8 for the first time ever. And I remember taking a picture of that. It was personal. I was like, from here on out, I'm going to climb. I'm going to climb, and the only way is up. That freshman and sophomore year of high school ended up being super huge for me. Even though we were a track team who practiced on concrete, we ran on concrete, we threw off concrete. We really didn't have the right places to practice. We didn't have the right equipment, but we had talent. We had hard workers. And that's when I realized that talent and hard work is one of the craziest combinations ever. I was at this school and on average, the state qualifying was 11-2 or 11 something around that, right? Or 11-3 or something. And we had a guy on our team running 10-9s consistently, 10-8s. I'll never forget his name. It's one of my close friends named Kamali. Now, whenever you're the fastest on a team, everyone's going to glaze you. Oh my God, he's from a different planet. Oh my God, he's just so. He was from Jamaica. Being from Jamaica is probably one of the biggest cheat codes when it came to sprinting. He worked harder than everyone else. He had the genes to back it up, and he had the attitude. He would put his head down and get to work. He was a hard worker, and it took him to a full D2 scholarship. That was the first diamond in the rough I met. His name was Kamali. So, after a couple seasons in high school, I decided to do my first AAU track and field season. And I did it with none other than Kamali himself. And it was a different ball game. It showed me the true viciousness of track and field. I asked Kamali, what are the requirements to go to nationals for AAU? And he told me there is no number. And when he told me there was no number, I was just confused. I was like, what do you mean? How do I know if I qualified? He's like, you don't know there. To qualify for regionals and to qualify for nationals, you have to beat a certain amount of people. You have to get top 5 at regionals. If you want a medal, you got to come top whatever at nationals. And hearing that, I was just like, so that means I could literally break the world record. But if 6 guys break the world record ahead of me, I'm not going. He was like, yeah. And I love that. If I work as hard as I can, I could stop someone's dream. But if someone works harder than me, they will stop mine. I love that. I loved that pressure. I loved that feeling of knowing nothing, of not knowing whether you're going to make it or not. It makes it exciting. That's what life is about. I realized track and field was survival of the fittest. And survival of the fittest doesn't mean strongest. It doesn't mean fastest. It doesn't mean smartest. It means who can adapt the best when the time demands it. And when we got to nationals, I would see Kamali running through the hallways because the tracks were filled and he couldn't practice early in the morning. And I would look at this dude, I'm like, the amount of work he probably puts in behind closed doors. He did not go from a rock to a diamond by sitting in the sand. He applied pressure and he worked. And that was my motivation. If he could do that at 16, if he could do this in high school, why can't I? Following that, I made one of my toughest decisions was to just not play basketball that following season and do a year of indoor track. It was in that year that I broke the indoor shot put school record, and I was on track to take everything, take everything, javelin, discus, and the outdoor shot put record. And then, COVID and whatnot. I'm not even going to talk too much about it. COVID took away the season that would have decided everything for me. But I got lucky. A coach ended up taking a chance on me. He saw my improvement. I would email him over the summer, and it was the first school that actually accepted me. And they already had another javelin thrower. And once I saw what the javelin thrower threw, I said, I guess I don't have to look for any more competition. Once I read what this Dan kid was throwing, I was like, holy crap. He's a national level thrower that's just going D3 for absolutely no reason. That's literally what it looked like on his, as a player profile. I'm like, he's throwing these New Balance Nationals requirements, but he's going to this D3 school. And it was just me who was scraping by trying to get into this D3 school. And we just meet up. That led to a very interesting freshman year. Dan was firing on all cylinders. Freshman of the year, conference athlete of the year. The kid was close to breaking the conference record freshman year. You know what I'm saying? I was just there. I was there. And I watched it all happen. But the thing was, that was a great year for me. I had insane amounts of improvement. But I loved it because I was in the shadow of Dan. I was in the shadow of this athlete that was just a couple levels higher than me. And that was all the motivation I needed. After seeing how good that freshman season went, we decided to link up over the summer and put in some work leading into sophomore year. And it was awesome. Sophomore year started and we didn't take the meets as a joke, but the meets would be the funnest part of the season. We practiced, it was hell. The off season, it was hell. Preseason, it was hell. When we were in season, man, this was a cakewalk. It was a cakewalk. All we had to do was show up at practice and put in some work and have fun at the meet and go yard.
This ball is crushed.
That's all there was to it. But the only reason it was that easy was because we were putting in so much work behind closed doors and we were locked in. We developed a killer mentality because we were in such a heated competition with each other. All the guys in the rest of the conference were like, oh, that's Trav and Dan. It was more of like a first name basis type thing with all the people we were competing against. And I loved it. It was like camaraderie, but rivalries at the same time. That junior season ended. Dan was very consistent all season. I was very consistent all season. But when we got to that conference championship at the end of the season, it was probably the windiest meet I've ever thrown in. The windiest meet Dan's ever thrown in. The windiest meet anyone there has ever thrown in. Javelins were being taken out of the air. 10 feet left, 20 feet right. Everyone's throws were inconsistent. The thing about me, though, is I throw darts. My jabs don't gain lift. They don't lose lift. They go straight through the air. So I was very surprised when on my last throw, I looked at the seating and I was second, but not second behind Dan. But then look back at Dan, and Dan told me it might be over for him. Not because he lost, because the competition wasn't there anymore. Everyone that beat him that day, he's already beat in the past. There was no more competition for him left. Senior year came around, Dan took that year off jab throwing. So you know who had to have all the weight on his shoulders? Big Dog. Once Dan said he's taking that season off, it was something psychological that happened to me. It was very hard to explain. It was hard for me to go as hard as I could. It was hard for me to go 100%. I could give you 90%. I give you 95%. But it was just that I always remember when I used to go 100%, I would look over in the room and Dan would be somewhere there. My reason for going as hard as I wanted to was there. I wanted to beat him, you know? I wanted to beat him. And after I beat him, I wanted to beat the next best guy. And that was my motivation. And it always was. And that's one thing I realized after I left school and athletics and track. I still wanted to beat someone. But then I realized I didn't have to go searching. This world is a competition. It's full of highly competitive individuals who are not going to let their foot off the gas until you do first. You must develop that killer mentality. I just wanted to give you guys some insight on, how I developed my mentality and consistently still want to work hard and still want to chase more goals and still want to beat more people and compete against more people and surround myself around high level competitive competition. Don't settle for anything. Don't get comfortable. Be competitive. Prove your own worth.